My boss handed me a termination letter at my father's graveside while dirt was still being thrown on his casket. 5 years later, I walked into Marcus Stone's corner office as the new owner of Sterling Marketing Group, watching his face drain of color as he realized the woman he destroyed had just become his judge, jury, and executioner. But let me start from the beginning, because revenge is a dish best served with the full story. Dad collapsed at his kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, coffee still steaming in his favorite mug. The paramedics said it was massive cardiac arrest. He was gone before he hit the floor. I was his only family, the daughter he'd raised alone after Mom died when I was 12. Sarah Chen, 28 years old, suddenly orphaned and completely shattered. I called my boss Marcus Stone through tears, barely able to form words. "Take all the time you need," he said softly. "Family comes first, Sarah. We'll handle everything here." Sterling Marketing Group had been my world for 3 years. I'd clawed my way up from junior account coordinator to senior strategist, working 60-hour weeks and sacrificing weekends. Marcus had always praised my dedication, calling me his rising star in team meetings. I'd landed our biggest client, Pinnacle Tech, by working 18-hour days for 2 months straight. The company was thriving partly because of campaigns I'd designed, strategies I'd developed, relationships I'd built through pure determination and sleepless nights. The funeral was small but beautiful. Dad would have loved seeing his old construction buddies sharing stories about his terrible jokes and generous heart. I stood at the graveside in my black dress, holding a single white rose, when I saw a familiar figure approaching through the headstones. Marcus Stone, wearing his expensive navy suit, walked toward me with an envelope in his hand. My first thought was gratitude. He'd come to pay respects to a man he'd never met, supporting me in my darkest hour. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice carrying none of the warmth from our phone call. "I'm sorry for your loss, but we need to discuss your employment status." He handed me the envelope while mourners were still filing past Dad's casket. Inside was a termination letter, effective immediately, citing extended absence and inability to fulfill job responsibilities. My hands shook as I read words like company restructuring and difficult decision. He'd fired me at my father's funeral, 30 minutes after we'd lowered the man who raised me into the ground. "You said take all the time I need," I whispered, my voice breaking. Marcus straightened his tie and shrugged. "Business is business, Sarah. We can't hold positions indefinitely. Your accounts have been redistributed, your office cleared out, security will escort you if you need to collect personal items." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with his rejection letter in one hand and my father's rose in the other. The few mourners who witnessed this exchange stared in shocked silence. I'd never felt more alone or humiliated in my entire life. That night, sitting in Dad's empty house surrounded by sympathy cards and casserole dishes from neighbors, I made a decision that would define the next 5 years of my life. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg for my job back or write angry emails to HR. Instead, I was going to do something that seemed impossible. I was going to buy Sterling Marketing Group and fire Marcus Stone the same way he'd fired me. It sounded insane, but grief and rage make excellent fuel for impossible dreams. I started by liquidating everything. Dad's house sold for $340,000. His truck, tools, and furniture brought another $45,000. I cashed out my 401k, taking the tax penalty, and sold my own car, apartment furnishings, and every piece of jewelry I owned. By the end of the month, I had $425,000 in cash and a one-bedroom apartment with a mattress on the floor. My old coworkers thought I'd lost my mind. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, brought me groceries, convinced I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was, but it was a very strategic breakdown. I enrolled in night classes for my MBA while working 3 different freelance marketing jobs during the day. Starbucks at 5 a.m., client calls at 6 a.m., classes until 10 p.m., then homework until 2 a.m. I lived on protein bars and coffee, sleeping 4 hours a night, but every assignment brought me closer to understanding how businesses were bought, sold, and valued. I studied leveraged buyouts, analyzed cash flows, and learned the language of hostile takeovers. My professors praised my theoretical scenarios, never knowing I was planning an actual corporate raid. By year 2, I'd saved $180,000 and launched Chen Strategic Consulting from my tiny apartment. My first client was a struggling tech startup that couldn't afford big agencies. I charged them half of Sterling's rates and delivered twice the results, working 18-hour days fueled by memories of Marcus's smug face at Dad's funeral. Word spread through Silicon Valley's startup community. Soon, I had 12 clients, then 25, then 50. I was building an army of satisfied customers who'd never heard of Sterling Marketing Group but knew Sarah Chen delivered miracles. Year 3 brought the breakthrough I'd been working toward. Pinnacle Tech, the client I'd originally won for Sterling, reached out directly. Their new campaigns under Sterling were failing miserably, and their CEO remembered the brilliant strategist who'd launched their most successful product line. "We made a mistake letting Sterling handle our account," he admitted over lunch. "We want you back, Sarah. Whatever it takes." I signed them for a 3-year contract worth $2.8 million annually, and suddenly, Chen Strategic wasn't just surviving, it was thriving beyond my wildest projections. I started hunting Sterling like a predator studies prey. I researched their client list, financial reports, and internal structure. Marcus had been making terrible decisions since I left, losing 3 major accounts and overspending on a fancy new office lease. Their profit margins were shrinking while mine were exploding. I hired a private investigator to track their business dealings and discovered something beautiful. Sterling Marketing Group was slowly bleeding money, and Marcus was too proud to admit his company was dying without the talent he'd thrown away at a funeral. By year 4, Chen Strategic had grown to 47 employees, working from a converted warehouse space. We were handling accounts Sterling could only dream of landing. I'd hired away 3 of their best designers and 2 senior account managers, offering them salaries Marcus couldn't match. Each defection weakened Sterling while strengthening my position. I was building the very thing Marcus had tried to destroy, except better, stronger, and powered by pure determination. The marketing industry was starting to notice the meteoric rise of the woman who'd appeared from nowhere. The phone call came on a rainy Thursday in October. Sterling's bank was calling in their loan, and Marcus needed to sell quickly to avoid bankruptcy. My lawyer had been monitoring their financial situation for months, waiting for exactly this moment. "They're asking $2.1 million for the company," he reported. "Given their debts and declining revenue, I think we can get them down to $1.6 million. I smiled, remembering the woman who'd been fired at her father's funeral with $400 in her checking account. "Offer them $1.2 million cash," I said. "But I want to deliver the offer personally." Sterling's office building looked smaller than I remembered, probably because I'd grown so much bigger. I walked through the lobby in my tailored black suit, carrying a leather briefcase that cost more than my first car. The receptionist didn't recognize me. I looked nothing like the broken woman who'd been escorted out 5 years ago. "I'm here to see Marcus Stone," I announced. "Sarah Chen from Chen Strategic Consulting. He's expecting me." She called upstairs, and within minutes, Marcus appeared in the lobby, looking older and more desperate than I'd ever seen him. "Sarah," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard you started your own little consulting business. Congratulations." He led me to the same conference room where he'd once praised my Pinnacle Tech campaign, but now the walls were bare, and the expensive furniture looked tired. "I appreciate you coming in person to discuss this acquisition opportunity," he continued, settling into his chair like he still held all the cards. He had no idea he was sitting across from the woman who'd spent 5 years planning his professional execution with surgical precision. "Let's skip the pleasantries. Marcus," I said, placing my briefcase on the table. "Your company is worth $1.2 million, and that's being generous. You're 3 months behind on your office lease, you've lost 60% of your client base, and your remaining accounts are threatening to leave." I opened my briefcase and slid a folder across the table. "Here's my offer, along with a detailed analysis of exactly why Sterling Marketing Group is failing." His face went pale as he flipped through pages, documenting every poor decision he'd made since firing me. Marcus tried to maintain his composure, but I could see sweat forming on his forehead. "This is quite thorough," he admitted, his voice tight. But Sterling has been in business for 15 years. We have history, reputation, established relationships. I leaned back in my chair and smiled the same cold smile he'd given me at Dad's funeral. Funny thing about reputation, Marcus. Yours has been steadily declining while mine has been skyrocketing. 3 of your former clients called me yesterday, asking if the rumors about acquisition were true. They're excited about potentially working with Chen Strategic. You can't be serious about this revenge fantasy, Marcus said, his professional mask finally slipping. You think buying my company will somehow make up for what happened? Business is business, Sarah. I made a difficult decision during a challenging time. I stood up slowly, savoring the moment I dreamed about for 1,827 days. You handed me a termination letter while dirt was still being thrown on my father's casket, I said quietly. You destroyed me when I was already broken. Now I'm going to return the favor, except I'll do it with class. I walked to the window overlooking the city, the same view Marcus had enjoyed while building his company on the backs of people like me. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to accept my offer because it's the only one you're going to get. Then I'm going to restructure this company, keep the employees who deserve to stay, and yes, Marcus, I'm going to fire you, publicly, with the same dignity you showed me at my father's funeral. I turned back to face him, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw real fear in his eyes. The signing took place the following Monday in a lawyer's office downtown. Marcus sat across from me, his hands shaking as he signed document after document, transferring ownership of Sterling Marketing Group to Chen Strategic Holdings. His wife had left him 6 months earlier, his house was in foreclosure, and his Mercedes had been repossessed. The man who'd once wielded power like a weapon was now broken, desperate, and completely at my mercy. I felt no joy in his suffering, only the cold satisfaction of justice finally being served after years of patient planning. On Tuesday morning, I walked into Sterling's office as the new CEO. I'd spent the weekend planning my first day, including the speech I would give to the remaining employees. Most of them remembered me from my original tenure, and several approached me with apologies for not speaking up when Marcus fired me so cruelly. That was then, I told them. Today we start fresh, and anyone who wants to be part of something bigger is welcome to stay. I scheduled individual meetings with each employee to discuss their future with the newly merged company. Marcus's termination meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. in his former office, which was now mine. I sat behind his old mahogany desk, surrounded by awards and photos documenting his 15-year career. He knocked softly before entering, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever imagined possible. Please sit down, Marcus, I said, gesturing to the chair where I'd once sat as his employee. We need to discuss your employment status. I handed him an envelope containing his termination letter, effective immediately, citing restructuring and leadership changes. The irony was perfect and intentional. You've won, Sarah, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. You've destroyed my company, my reputation, my life. I hope it was worth it. I looked at him across the desk and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. This broken man wasn't the monster I'd been fighting for 5 years. He was just a weak person who'd made a terrible decision and lost everything because of it. It was never about destroying you, Marcus, I said softly. It was about proving that cruelty has consequences and that some people refuse to stay broken. I walked him to the elevator personally, shaking his hand one final time. 6 months later, Chen Strategic Marketing has become one of the fastest-growing agencies on the West Coast. We've acquired 2 smaller competitors, landed Fortune 500 clients, and been featured in Forbes as a company to watch. I keep a photo of Dad on my desk, right next to the termination letter Marcus gave me at the funeral, both reminders of how far I've traveled from that broken woman standing at a graveside. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's becoming so successful that your enemies become irrelevant. Marcus taught me that business is business, and I learned that lesson better than he ever imagined possible.